Welcome to Twice 5 Miles Radio, fertile ground for conversations worth listening to and remembering. I'm your host, James Nave. Always airing first on WPVM-LP Asheville 103.7 and streaming online, WPVMFM.org, the voice of Asheville heard all over the world, and on other community radio stations like KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio, out of Taos, New Mexico. Thank you, Walter Parks, for our theme song, walterparks.com for more on Walter's music. Thank you to Devine Dial for managing WPVM-FM and Robin Collier for managing KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio, out of Taos, New Mexico. You can always reach me, Nave, at jamesnave.com. Nave is spelled N-A-V-E, and I'd like to remind you that we are sponsored by the Imaginative Storm Writing Project. If you'd like to improve your writing chops, imaginativestorm.com is a good place to go. There you'll find all kinds of resources for writers. We also have a couple of free workshops, and you're welcome to attend those. They always happen on Zoom on Saturday at noon Eastern Time and on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And they only go for an hour, and we only write for 10 minutes. So if you're interested in something like that, it's available at imaginativestorm.com. Today I'm going solo once again. I do have some guests lined up for you in the upcoming weeks. That said, I wanted to do this solo show for you today because I'm in Paris, France, and I'm sitting in the apartment that I've mentioned many, many times on Rue Dauphine. The number of the building is 38 Rue Dauphine, which is in the 6th arrondissement. If you've read anything about the literary scene in Paris, you probably remember that the entire mythos for the left bank was started by the lost generation of writers, Gertrude Stein, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Ezra Pound, Ernest Hemingway, Sylvia Beach. Sylvia Beach founded Shakespeare and Company, which was the gathering spot for all of these writers way back when. And after she sold it to George Whitman, he continued on with Shakespeare and Company until he died on December the 14th, 2011, at the age of 98, just 2 days after his birthday. His daughter, Sylvia Whitman, named after Sylvia Beach, took over the legacy of the bookstore. I remember when she took the bookstore over. I was in Paris when that time was happening, and she cleaned it up, turned it into what is considered now a literary hub, must visit when you come to Paris if you're a writer. So the legacy from all of those long days ago still continues to this day. You can go to Shakespeare and Company and stand outside and watch people coming and going, and often there's a line out, a waiting line to go into the bookstore. So it's still thriving, maybe even more so today than when all of the literary figures like Simone de Beauvoir, Marguerite Duras, Anaïs Nin, Djuna Barnes, Jean-Paul Sartre, James Baldwin, Richard Wright, and Allen Ginsberg were all part of that community back in the 50s and the 60s. This apartment I'm sitting in right now at 38 Rue Dauphine was certainly here then. In fact, this building was built in the 1600s. So who knows how many people have lived in this little space since then. Hundreds, maybe even thousands. I may be overestimating. It's only 30 square meters, which is 322 square feet. It's not very big, so you'd have to work to get thousands in here. But you get the point. It's been here a long time. A lot of people have been in this apartment over those years. So I'm one of many. And yet there's more to this place for me than a small studio apartment, one room's 322 square feet. Which brings me around to the theme of what I would like to talk about during our time together. The theme is home, place, belonging. Throughout your lifetime, you have probably experienced a sense of home, a sense of place, a sense of belonging. Maybe you've had it briefly, maybe you've had it for a long period of time. Either way, once you feel it, there's a sense of completion, a sense of warmth, a sense of gratitude that comes when you know you're safely in a place where you fit, where you feel at ease, where you can relax and dream. And of course, when I say dream, I mean dreaming in the sense of dreaming when you're asleep, also dreaming when you're wide awake, just sitting in a room like I am right now, thinking about all of the years my friend John Van Hasselt has had this place and how important it's been to him and how it's been his home, which is changing because he's keeping it as a studio, and yet it will no longer be his home. So as I sit here thinking about all of those years, and I've been coming here since 1985, 40 years. So in many ways, even though this isn't my home, I've been attached to this one small spot in the world for the past 40 years. It's been a touchstone, a place to come, a place for me to dream, and my friendship with John has endured since 1968 when we first met at Brevard Junior College, Brevard, North Carolina, at the very end of our teenage years. Like I said, it was 1968, and if you've read any history at all, you know that during that time, the whole country was in a nervous breakdown. Things were happening all over the place, and it was not unsimilar to what's going on in 2025 right now. There was a creative surge in music. There was a lot of experimentation going on. A lot of big U.S. news events happened. On April 4th, Martin Luther King was assassinated on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. His assassination generated nationwide riots over 100 cities. Then on June the 5th, Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated after winning the California Democratic presidential primary. And both of those deaths, coupled with the escalating Vietnam War and all of the other turmoil that was going on during that time, really created tension in America, similar to what we're experiencing today in 2025. The night Robert F. Kennedy was killed was the same night I graduated from Inca High School. And I remember having my bags packed, graduation happened, and right after we stepped off the stage, I put my bag in Larry Wheeler's square bag Volkswagen. I think my brother David was with us, and maybe Eddie Ramsey went along, so there were 4 of us. And we started driving that night, headed to Myrtle Beach. Myrtle Beach was the go-to place for people when they graduated from high school, and also the go-to place for people when they wanted to go on their spring breaks. I was familiar with Myrtle Beach because as a little boy, my father and mother and our whole family had gone to Arrowhead camping grounds right on the shore. We had parked our camping trailer there and had spent some summers at Myrtle Beach. But this time I was going to Myrtle Beach as a graduating senior. And of course we had a lot of energy, so we planned to drive all night. At the time, the roads weren't quite as straight and good as they are now, so it was around a 350-mile trip, 6 or 7 hours. We left around 11 o'clock in the evening after the graduation was over, and off we went. I remember driving down Interstate 26, or one of the roads to Myrtle Beach, and it was getting late, around 3 a.m., and we were scanning the radio. And news came over the radio that Robert F. Kennedy had been shot in California. He was shot at midnight or so in California, so it was around 3 o'clock when we were listening to this news broadcast on Larry Wheeler's AM radio. And I remember sensing something terrible going on, and yet it seemed at such a distance from me. The radio had bad speakers. It was AM, static. Who knows what station was broadcasting? I don't even remember where we were. We were either in North Carolina or South Carolina. By then, we were probably somewhere near Columbia, South Carolina, if I don't miss my guess. And I remember hearing that. Robert F. Kennedy has been assassinated. We don't know if he will live or not. And I remembered so dramatically 5 years earlier, John Kennedy, his brother, being assassinated. And I knew there was so much going on way out beyond me, and yet because I had grown up in Western North Carolina in a rather insulated environment, really, I wasn't particularly connected to those grand national events. And yet, there we were, middle of the night, listening to this voice, faint as it was, a harbinger of things to come that I would be involved in for the rest of my life, like I am right now sitting here in this apartment on Rue Dauphine, making this radio show for you. You maybe are listening to it on WPVM-FM or KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio out of Taos. It's coming to you over a set of earbuds, maybe a set of speakers. Maybe you're listening to it on a car radio, similar to what I was hearing when we were driving to Myrtle Beach. The radio has been a part of my life since I was a little boy, and here we are, still a part of my life. That night, it was deeply a part of my life in the moment, and it also haunted me. I can still faintly hear that broadcast. Even to this day, I remember what it sounded like, and I most especially remember what it felt like, my emotional sensibilities of something impending, something existential that seemed so immediate. Now, here's the irony. 1968 was 57 years ago, and here we are today, 2025. It still seems just as immediate now as it did then. And yet, over these past 57 years, almost 60 years, so much has unfolded, so many things have happened. We can still trace much of what's going on today back to those earlier times. Nothing is separated from the previous circumstances. All of those circumstances bring us to where we are in whatever moment we're existing in. And yet every moment is gone just as soon as it appears. T.S. Eliot sums it up really well in the beginning of his poem, The Four Quartets. He says, "Time present and time past are both perhaps present in time future, and time future contained in time past. If all time is eternally present, all time is unredeemable." Or to put it straight up, once it's gone, it's gone. You can't ever get it back. You can't redeem time like you can redeem a coupon or redeem $1 or trade your car in for a better car and get some credit for it. Once it's gone, nothing's there. It's absent. The future is in front of you, the past is behind you, and the present is always right now, which suggests perhaps there's no linear business going on at all. Maybe it's just always the eternal now. How many times have you heard that? We could talk about that forever if we met with a cup of coffee at a coffee shop somewhere in the world, couldn't we? I'm also thinking of another poet right now. His name is Ocean Vuong, and I once had a conversation with him years ago, and he was telling me that he thought a good name for a poetry book would be Felt Absence. You feel the absence in the immediate now, and it's always there. That's what I was feeling on graduation night when I listened to that radio broadcast saying Kennedy had been shot. It was a felt absence. Something was missing, and something was filling up that place of missing with something else. And it's been rolling on like that ever since. And for me, even before, from a radio point of view, because when I was very, very young, I would listen to the radio as I fell asleep at night. I always played easy listening music. I don't know why I like that smooth music so much. I also listened to my father's shortwave radio, and I could hear static through the radio speaker and in the distance languages that I didn't understand. And of course, every morning when I woke, went upstairs to breakfast, my mother was playing the AM radio, WWNC 57.0, with the early morning shows hosted first by Farmer Russ and then later hosted by Scotty Rodarmer. So, staying on the idea of home, belonging, place, I'm reminded of another writer, Gaston Bachelard. He wrote a book, you can still buy it at any of your local bookstores, called The Poetics of Space. And in that book, he talks about the idea of home being a nest, a place where you put yourself, a place where you can warm your body, a place where you can dream. And again, sitting here on Rue Dauphine in this little apartment, I am dreaming of sorts. I'm dreaming back to those times when I was younger. And I'm also dreaming forward to what's coming next. Who knows how long any of this will last. But in his book, Poetics of Space, he talks about nesting, finding a place And what he says, anywhere in the world you go, if you do a slight sketch of a house, a square, a roof, a couple of windows and a door, and maybe a little pathway leading up to the door, and you show that to anyone, the image of the hut, people will have an emotional response, creates a dopamine, a sense of a need for a place, a need for belonging. Or if someone belongs somewhere and someone knows exactly where they live and where their home is, it will create a sense of more belonging in their minds. Now, I've often thought, as I've traveled around the world, and traveled most especially throughout the U.S., no matter what town you land in, no matter how bleak it looks to you, you can always find 2 or 3 people there who have a home in that little place, and they will tell you it's one of the best places on earth to live. They wouldn't go anywhere else. It's home, it's place, it's the nest where they belong. And in some ways, coming back to this place here at Rue Dauphine, even though I haven't lived here, even though it's been John's place all this time, I've been coming here, and it's been a constant in my life. I've always been able to come and visit, and sometimes I come once a year for a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks. This time I've been here for 4 weeks. So over the last many, many years, since 1985, I've probably clocked a couple of years in this neighborhood, maybe more, maybe 3 years, who knows? I haven't really counted it. Point is, the sense of place, the sense of home exists here for me, as you probably have your own memories of place, your own memories of a home that exists for you, even if you are no longer in it. It's a place in the mind, in the spirit, as much as it is a place in reality, like the 4 walls that I'm looking at now. Also, in The Poetics of Space, Gaston Bachelard talks about the different locations in a house and how those locations hold different kinds of spaces for each person who lives there. He says, for example, when someone comes to visit you, you often will invite them into the living room or the kitchen, where the warm conversations happen, where the getting to know happens. He also says you very seldom invite strangers to go into your basement. That's where the dark secrets are. He also points out that you very seldom, if ever, invite strangers into your house and ask them to go to the attic where the dreams exist. You bring the strangers into the home, to the kitchen, to the living room, to the den, to the place where they can look out on the garden, where everything is ordinary, everything is normal, it's all good in the kingdom. Upstairs, where the dreams are, who knows what that will reveal to the strangers, or even more, downstairs where the secrets are. What kind of secrets do you keep? What kind of secrets are you willing to tell? How much will you redeem to tell one of those secrets? What's the price you're willing to accept to reveal something that you've been keeping quiet for many, many years? Maybe never will you reveal those secrets you've been keeping quiet for many years. The reason I'm on all of this right now is because I'm playing around with the idea of how one tells an entire life's story. I have plenty of stories to tell. Scenes. One thing happened here, like going to the beach on graduation night with my brother David, Larry Wheeler, Eddie Ramsey. Nothing happened in the car, and yet everything happened in the country. So how do you put a story together about your life and tell the things you would like to tell, the scenes from your life, and tie those scenes into what's going on in the greater world? I'm experimenting with that. I don't quite know exactly how to do it, and yet I'm using this show right now, this public presentation, this offering to you, as a way of exploring that. And maybe you will get something out of my exploration and start asking questions for yourself about how do you tell whatever stories you have to tell. How do you present the scenes of your life in a way that has some narrative through line that will carry the listener, the reader, the audience to the end of whatever tale you're trying to tell. Once upon a time, then everybody leans in and you go from there. So when you think of your story, it's important to think of anchor points. So one big anchor point I have in my story is this spot here on Rue Dauphine. Another anchor point I have in my story, Pine Lane, 12 Pine Lane, the place where I grew up off of Brevard Road in the 1950s. Second anchor point. Third anchor point I have in my story is the road. That place that has taken me all over the world in search of those voices I heard when I was a little boy in the basement, thinking about what was out there, wondering who spoke those languages I didn't understand. I wrote a poem about the road years ago when I was traveling around the country performing poetry for students. I wasn't all that far from Asheville. I was at Mayland Community College in Spruce Pine, North Carolina. I'd given a presentation that morning, and it was lunchtime. I was in the cafeteria. I think maybe I was sitting outside at a table, and I was thinking of traveling, of the road. I was thinking of Brevard Road, where I had grown up, and I was thinking of the little lane I had grown up on and where I started and where I was headed. So I was sitting there at the table eating some macaroni and cheese, maybe some chicken noodle soup from the cafeteria, just staring out at the mountains, thinking about life. And I had my paper beside me and I had a pen, which I often do, and I just started to write. And I was thinking about the road and how much it had given me and how much I loved it. And this was years ago. I still have this same sensibility now. And it's really not the road that I'm in love with or the road that's in love with me. It's the movement. It's the possibilities that exist when you look around the next corner, the one you've not looked around before, and look down the street, down the alley, down the path. And there's something down there, and you've never seen it. It's brand new. It's original. And if you go down the path or the road, you'll discover it. And of course, there are many roads inside your imagination. You never have to leave your chair, and you can go out and discover things, or you can go out on the street, walk down the corner, take a ride, and who knows what you will meet. So here's the little poem that I wrote sitting there that afternoon during lunch, and it goes like this. The road is in love with me. It comes turning out of my childhood, twisting through my morning, interrupting my picnic. It taps when I'm asleep, like a kitten, wishfully waiting for the door to open. I'm always dreaming of the road. As a child, I stood beside it and watched it as it stretched in the summer afternoon, so concrete, so eternal. As a young man, it carried me through my gate, past my school with its oak wooden floors and wide eastern views, past my church, so small now, inadequate steeple, stained glass windows, carried me past gardens with corn so high I'm sure it only grew to give the wind a place to go, carried me past my father's blows and my mother's easy words, carried me away from home into the night, and the next morning, and the next night, and the next morning, until I stand before you right here, breathing and alive. The road is in love with me. So there's my third anchor point, the road in this story. Of course, the road is not in love with me. The road's the road. It's just there. I'm in love with the road, or I'm infatuated with what the road can give me. So maybe, if you carry that a little further, if you fall in love with the things that you are most interested in, the things that spark your curiosity, fire up your imagination, put a little wind in your sails, if you fall in love with those things, then in a sense you're falling in love with yourself. It wouldn't make much of a poem. I mean, think of this. I am in love with me. I come turning out of my childhood. I come twisting through my morning. I interrupt my picnic. I tap when I'm asleep like a kitten wishfully waiting for the door to open. I'm always dreaming of me. And I could go on with that, but you get the point. You shift around the perspective a little bit, and it changes the entire vibe. The point of the poem, of course, is it's an anchor point, and I am in love with the idea of moving from one place to the next. And I can trace that love to the great rewards I've had following those imaginative, curious beats that are always there for all of us. You don't have to go very far to have this experience. You can walk out of your house wherever you are right now, or if you're listening to this in the car, you can get out in a parking lot. And the moment you step out, you're in a brand new space. So it's not about getting on the road and traveling thousands of miles. These anchor points are all there in your memory, inside of you. Many of them you don't remember. Often, in telling these stories, in discovering the scenes you want to visit, the unknown ones, the unfound ones, the secret ones in the basement, or the scenes you've visited many times and perhaps you're curious about what else might be there underneath all of those official things that you've been talking about for many years. This is just part of that storytelling notion that we're all inclined to do. Even if it's a one-on-one conversation, you still end up telling stories, even if you don't consider yourself an official storyteller. So I have 3 touch points: Pine Lane, Rue Dauphine, and the road. The 4th touch point, the news of the day. What's going on outside of me, even though I can't see all of the action that's happening around the world. It's 2025 and there's a lot of disruption. The question I'm asking myself, what do I do in these moments to create meaning, home, place, belonging? What can I communicate that will give you a sense of who you are? How can I transfer some of my sense or need for sovereignty into some kind of message that will allow you to do the same for yourself and then for others as well? That's the pushback. That's how you stay strong in these times of great change. So one of the ideas that I have for generating this story that I would like to tell, frame the story around the current events of the day. For example, when I told you about driving to Myrtle Beach, I gave you some historical headlines around what was happening in America during that time. So to keep the idea of framing a story around what's going on today, April the 9th, 2025, on a Wednesday. Here are the headlines from the New York Times online edition. I'm looking at it right now on my computer screen. Sitting here in this small apartment on Rue Dauphine in a building that's been here since the 1600s. So here's what the New York Times says right now. Global markets sink as U.S. implements punishing tariffs. Includes a 104% levy on Chinese goods, nearly all allies hit. Shares in Europe and Asia fall, S&P 500 near bear market. Or on a more humorous note, the skin on mysterious medieval books concealed a shaggy surprise. The material on the covers of the books from a French abbey was too hairy to have come from local mammals. Researchers identify its more distant origin. And even though all of this action is happening, I'm sitting here in this quiet room, I don't see any of it. I'm not immediately affected by it, although I suspect I will be affected like the rest of us by all of this disruption. How could we avoid it? And some people listening to this show are very excited about this. They voted this in. They want this to happen. And this is how they want the world to be. I won't elaborate other than to say I am definitely, absolutely, 100% not, I say not, in that camp. So what I'm doing about it, I am presenting the work that I have been engaged in with my creative collaborator Allegra Huston for the last 5 years, and that work is coupled onto all the other work that I've done throughout my life. I was visiting my friend Alexandra Weber last night. She's here in Paris. Same time frame I'm here. I think I inspired her to come. She has an apartment not far from here. She's with a friend of hers, a traveling companion. His name is Forrest, and they're having a very nice time over at her place. And I have been going over occasionally and visiting a bit, which I enjoy, of course. Alexandra lives in Taos, just for the record. I was over there visiting them because yesterday afternoon I presented an Imaginative Storm writing workshop to 40 people in an event here in Paris sponsored by Adrian Leeds, a friend of mine who sells real estate, adrianleeds.com if you're interested in checking out the real estate market in Paris. Adrian hosts this event and invited me to speak, and I basically gave a writing workshop, and Alexandra and her new friend Stephanie and Forrest all came to be part of the workshop, and then we walked back afterwards. And when we got back to Alexandra's house, I was talking with Alexandra and Forrest, and they were asking me about what it was like growing up in western North Carolina in the 50s. And I told them that I lived in a little house on Pine Lane, and Forrest was wondering, well, where is Pine Lane? Is it a town? I said, no, it's a little dirt road, or it was a little dirt road that jutted off of Brevard Road, about 8 miles outside of Asheville. I've talked about that place many, many times on this show. It's an anchor point, again, where you start, where you end, where you are right now. And as I was sitting there telling Forrest about where I grew up, I said, well, it was very much country. My father was working for the power company. And at that point, I realized, wait a minute. I said, I have some 8mm digitalized movies, home movies my father took when I was a little boy, and my brother had them digitalized, and I can show you the place. So I opened up my MacBook Air, and went to iMovie, opened up those movies, silent movies, no sound, of course, and there we were, my birthday, when I was 5 years old. And there was a movie of me and my brother and my cousin Douglas and some of the other cousins in the garden with corn so high, I'm sure it only grew to give the wind a place to go. So my memory of the high corn as a child actually proved to be true. There it was. I'd watched those movies before, but I'd never actually shared them with friends who were curious about where I came from. And it was great fun to open up the movies. They were in color, not black and white, so you could see the trees, you could see the house. My brother David and I painted the house red. My father had us go out and take some paintbrushes and paint the side red. He built the house in 1953, and we did grow up in it. So that was the place. Just like Rue Dauphine is also the place as well. So between those times in the 50s, when those movies were shot, dialing forward throughout my life, and all of the things that I've done interacting with the cultural situations, the historical situations, the geographic locations, I have acquired a great deal of stories, as you have too. And now here I am, April the 9th, 2025, reading you the headlines, sitting here looking at my blue water bottle, my shoes on the floor with some blue socks, a few other odds and ends, a tripod, my iPhone, in this Spartan environment that was once full of material, full of clothes, but now it's empty. And it's very nice to be in this place, points, locations, and then the scenes that happen around that. So last night was a scene, and I watched Alexandra and Forrest watch the screen and start to see me in a very different light. Maybe not see me in a different light as much as understand where I'm coming from. My father, who was a World War II veteran, enjoyed making those 8mm films. And in fact, he made little movies. And in one of the scenes I showed Alexandra and Forrest last night, they were watching the scene that my father had directed. It could not have been a more amateurish movie. We were in the field below the house. We were walking along the edge of the field. My grandfather, we called him Pappy, had a shotgun. And everybody in the family admired that shotgun. It was built in 1894, stamped on the gun. It was an easy gun to buy. He probably bought it at Sears or somewhere, so it was not a collector's item. But it was a big, long 12-gauge shotgun. And my grandfather would go out into the woods, and he would hunt squirrels, and he would hunt rabbits, and we all wanted to be hunters like my grandfather Pappy. So my father gives my brother David and gives me these wooden rifles, little wooden rifles. David and I both were wearing coonskin caps because they were very popular back then. So we looked like little Daniel Boones or Davy Crockett's or whatever the characters were that were on TV at the time wearing those coonskin caps. So the scene is my grandfather Pappy with his shotgun over his shoulder, walking up the edge of the field and turning the corner to face the camera, my brother David on one side and me on the other. So Pappy walks toward the camera. I'm sure my father was giving him directions at the time, silent movies, and they're walking toward the camera, and then he points into the trees. And my brother David raises his wooden rifle and fires. And then he runs over into the bushes and he grabs a squirrel. Now, of course, the squirrel was a squirrel my grandfather Pappy had shot earlier in the day on his hunting trip into the woods. This squirrel was now the squirrel my brother shot with his fake wooden rifle. So he picks it up and he's smiling, and then the next scene, we moving further down the field, and Pappy points again, and then I shoot, and I run over, and I pick up the same squirrel, and I hold it up, because now I bagged a squirrel as well. And then the next scene, my brother David is walking up the field with a squirrel tied to his belt. Next scene, I'm walking up the field with the same squirrel tied to my belt. Poor squirrel, right? And then the final scene, my brother David and I are walking together with Pappy, and we're headed up the hill out of the forest after having a great successful hunt. And the whole thing was directed by my father, and at the end of the little movie, he had a sign that he had made and somehow filmed it that said, "The End." So last night we were sitting there viewing this movie that was shot in the 1950s. A scene from the story. What happened to my grandfather's shotgun? It sat in the corner for years. He eventually stopped hunting. He went to Florida. He died in Florida. I don't remember when, maybe in the late 70s. My brother David ended up with a shotgun. The shotgun ended up in pieces. Now I have no idea where it is. My brother David may still have it. The shotgun hasn't been fired in many years. And all I have of that shotgun now, I have the memory of it leaning in the corner in the dining room where we all had Sunday dinner after church. And because of the questions Alexandra and Forrest were asking me about what it was like on Brevard Road, I showed them the little movie, and everything flooded back for me, and then I was able to tell the story to them. The scene came alive again. They enjoyed it, I enjoyed it, and now I'm enjoying telling it again here on this show. One of the things I realized when I was showing the movie to Alexandra and Forrest, I realized how important it is to ask why. Why write something like a memoir? Why tell a story? Why show up and do anything that's artistic? And the reason why is because it's within my range. It's within your range. It's not so much about getting it out into the world with a million people to look at it. More, it's a process of understanding where I stand in the world, where you stand in the world. So as I sit here in Rue Dauphine, where I'm sitting in the world right now, my friend John has dropped by, and he's organizing some of the material. He's in the cuisine area, which is also the kitchen area, getting ready to make a little bit of a lunch. And the sun is shining in through the window, and the place is warm. And again, it feels like a nest. It feels like home. It's also the end of this era. Things are closing down here. So what do you do when something closes down in one place? How do you pick up the next beat? and what do you do with it? And even though Rue Dauphine is closing down for John and me, somebody else will come along and occupy this place as well. In 1985, I arrived at this same door, and I came here to visit John because he was living in France and Paris, and I was a bit fascinated with the idea of coming to Europe for the first time, which I did in 1985. I was 35 years old. I graduated from UNCA with a degree in political science and had studied a little French. I knew John was living here in Paris and he was working here as a photographer, and I thought, what better way to celebrate my graduation at 35 years old from college than to go to Paris and see my buddy John. I hadn't seen John in 15 years. I had no idea if we would even connect or not. Had his phone number. Called him up. He said, sure, come over. The door's always open. 38 Rue Dauphine. I'll be here when you arrive. So I arrived in June of 1985. I knocked on the door. John opened the door. He said, come in. And we sat down and we started talking as if 15 years had not even passed. It was really great. I had a really fantastic 2 weeks hanging around Paris with John. And then I went on a sojourn. I hitchhiked south, and I wanted to see France, and I figured, well, if I walk and I hitchhike, I'll be able to get a sense of the French territory, the French area. I'd studied French and thought I could speak it. Turned out it was a lot harder to speak than I thought. Even to this day, I still struggle with it. I've given up on being a French speaker and just learned how to appreciate a bit of the language. So after a couple of weeks here at Rue Dauphine, I took off south and ended up at a Tibetan Buddhist center. I don't think of myself as particularly spiritual, and I don't particularly have any kind of spiritual discipline that I practice. I know a lot of people who do. A lot of people take great pride in their spiritual disciplines. They spend lots and lots of time with it and get great rewards for it. I never felt all that much of a need to do that. Maybe if I have a spiritual discipline, it's poetry, if it's anything. That said, I did spend 2 terrific weeks at this Tibetan Buddhist center. I met a lot of great people. The Tibetan monks came, and I listened to them speak, and I had good conversations. But the thing that I most especially did while I was at the center, I would sit on the hay bales in the fields in the afternoon, or sit along a stream, or sit underneath a tree, and I was memorizing poetry, as I still do. And I was memorizing Fern Hill by Dylan Thomas. And the reason I was so drawn to that piece was because it reminded me of my home, Pine Lane. It reminded me of growing up with the corn so high it only gave the wind a place to go. It reminded me of the movies I showed to Forrest and Alexandra last night. I was connected to something really deep because of Fern Hill. I was there at the Tibetan Buddhist Center, and I was also connecting with the deep relationship I had with my buddy John Van Hassel, which is still going on right now. John's just down the street buying some food to make lunch as I'm recording this. It could not be more immediate. Fern Hill by Dylan Thomas. I love that poem, and I would just like to recite it for you now to give you a sense of how the sun feels coming through the windows here at Rue Dauphine, how I felt as a little boy playing in the fields around Pine Lane, the blackberries, the chickens, the gardens, the church, the father playing the fiddle, the mother getting me up in the morning and letting me listen to the radio, Scotty Rodarmer read the farm news, all of that. So here is Fern Hill by Dylan Thomas. I've recited this poem before on this show. I can never get enough of this piece. So here we go, Fern Hill by Dylan Thomas. I hope you enjoy it. Now as I was young and easy under the apple boughs, about the lilting house, and happy as the grass was green, the night above the dingle starry, time let me hail and climb, golden in the heydays of his eyes. And honored among wagons I was prince of the apple towns, and once below a time I lordly had the trees and leaves trail with daisies and barley down the rivers of the windfall light. And as I was green and carefree, famous among the barns, about the happy yard, and singing as the farm was home in the sun that is young once only. Time let me play and be golden in the mercy of his means, and green and golden I was huntsman and herdsman. The calves sang to my horn, the foxes on the hills barked clear and cold, and the Sabbath rang slowly in the pebbles of the holy streams. All the sun long it was running. It was lovely. The hayfields high as the house, the tunes from the chimneys. It was air and play, lovely and watery, and fire green as grass. And nightly under the simple stars, as I rode to sleep, the owls were bearing the farm away. All the moon long I heard, blessed among the stables, the night jars flying with the ricks, and the horses flashing into the dark. And then to awake, and the farm, like a wanderer white with the dew, come back, the cock on his shoulder. It was all shining. It was Adam and maiden. The sky gathered again, and the sun grew round that very day. So it must have been after the birth of the simple light in the first spinning place, these spellbound horses walking warm out of the whinnying green stable onto the field of praise, and on and among foxes and pheasants, by the gay house, under the new-made clouds, and happy as the heart was long in the sun, born over and over, I ran my heedless ways, my wishes raced through house-high hay, and nothing I cared at my sky-blue trades that time allows in all his tuneful turning, so few and such morning songs before the children, green and golden, follow him out of grace. Nothing I cared in the lamb-white days that time would take me up to the swallow-thronged loft by the shadow of my hand in the moon that is always rising, nor that riding to sleep I should hear him fly with the high fields and wake to the farm, forever fled the childless land. Oh, as I was young and easy in the mercy of his means, time held me green and dying, though I sang in my chains like the sea. And that was Fern Hill by Dylan Thomas. To this day, it reminds me of growing up in western North Carolina. And the line in my poem about the road, the corn so high, I'm sure it only grew to give the wind a place to go, was inspired by Fern Hill. I've always liked that poem, and other poems I've written have been inspired by the sensibilities in Fern Hill. That sensibility, especially of time passing, and how unaware we are of it. And then when it finally passes, we become acutely aware of it as if it happened overnight, when in fact, it took a long time to get from point A to point B. And all those anchor points in between, like Pine Lane, Rue Dauphine, the road. Another significant anchor point in my life has been Taos, New Mexico. If you've been in Taos for a while, you've probably noticed a book floating around in the bookstore called Taos Portraits. The reason I bring that up is because the photographs in that book are all about the beauty gradually sliding away, all about getting from point A to point B, all about artists in Taos who have done something significant, or people who are creative in Taos who have done something significant. And Paul O'Connor photographed these people, and they all ended up in Taos Portrait 1. Taos Portrait 1 implies there's a Taos Portrait 2, which actually is out right now. And on the June the 6th, Allegra and I are partners in the Imaginative Storm Writing Project. Allegra Huston and I are going to host the Taos Portrait 2 book launch on June the 6th at the TCA. And the reason this is important to tie into what I've been talking about so far, when Paul took my picture for Taos Portraits 2, and I do appear in that book, the reason he photographed my face was because of the age because of the wrinkles, because of the age spots, not because of the beauty of my face from the classic point of view. He thought the wrinkles on my face comprised the beauty that he desired, and indeed he took the picture, and indeed those wrinkles do show. And those wrinkles wouldn't be there had I not been running through the hayfields high as the house on Pine Lane, or traveling to see John at Rue Dauphine in Paris, or doing any of the rest of the things that I'm now working on as little scenes to put in a bigger story I want to tell. The bells are ringing now. I hear the bells. Those are the bells from Notre Dame. They're ringing. Notre Dame almost burned, and now it's back in form. People are visiting it again. I plan to go there before I travel back to Taos this coming Sunday. So the evening is coming upon us now. I'm looking out of the window, the sun's still shining through. The rooftops have little chimneys in them, and some of them look like Darth Vader staring at me with the buggy eyes in the little hood, and it's a chimney covering, but it does look like Darth Vader. And before I say goodbye, I'd like to come back to my childhood at Pine Lane as I sit here in Rue Dauphine, and I'd like to read a poem for you that I've included in my book 100 Days, Poems After Cancer. And this poem is number 78. It was written on the 78th day, and it was written when I was in New York. And it's about growing up in western North Carolina. And it's titled A Stormy Night. Rooftop drains flooded and roared last night as thunderstorms rumbled across the city. Rain splashing on the windows reminded me of the old cowboy series Rawhide, which I watched on my black and white TV when I was a boy. A flash flood brought trouble. Or as one cowhand put it, sure don't look like no happy time coming. Every week I watch those rawhide cowboys drive their herds across the arid land, crawling with wolves, murderers, bandits, shell-shocked Civil War soldiers, dry gullies, and cattle rustlers. Ain't gonna be no second chance, Gil Favor, the trail boss, said to Rowdy Yates, a 30-year-old Clint Eastwood who was aiming down the barrel of his revolver, ready to fire. I was in high school by the time Rawhide's final episode aired on January the 4th, 1965. Gil Favor and Rowdy Yates rode off with the credits. I weighed 160 pounds, drove a baby blue Plymouth Valiant, and had won a blue ribbon at the high school science fair for building a Tesla coil. The Vietnam War was raging, and the same drains that flooded up and down 27th Street last night were overflowing even then in the 1960s rain. And that was poem number 78, A Stormy Night, from my book 100 Days, Poems After Cancer, which I'm really happy to have. It's a manageable memoir of 100 prose poems, which I wrote in 100 days after having surgery for prostate cancer. That was 12 years ago. The book's been around for a while. I do love returning to those poems because they remind me of another time. So here we are at the end of our time together, and I want to say thank you ever so much for listening to this and being part of this process that I'm working on now. This radio show has been evolving. I'm now in the 9th year. I may be coming on to the 10th year by now. I'm not even sure anymore. And it's been a real pleasure to be able to use this kind of time to explore these things and feel okay about it. That's because I'm broadcasting this show on community radio, and community radio, unlike commercial radio, has some rules, but one rule it has that you can follow is people ask you in the community radio world to broadcast things that are of interest to the community outside of the commercial situations. So that's why I'm able to do this, and I'm grateful to Davine Dial and Robin Collier for helping me with that, because they do air this show in Asheville and in Taos. And so I'm glad that you went with me on this journey, starting in Paris on Rue Dauphine, which is where I still am, watching a fly buzz around the room. My buddy John and I are getting ready to go out for an afternoon walk. I then took you to Pine Lane and all the experiences that I've had there. My grandfather taking us on a faux squirrel hunting trip. How about that? And all the other things that have gone on in my life. I'm eventually going to put this into some story, and I'm not sure exactly how it's going to be. But I do know that evening has come here in Paris. It's almost 6 p.m., and it's time to move on into the night. And I'd like to say once again, thank you ever so much for listening to Twice 5 Miles Radio, fertile ground for conversations worth listening to and remembering. I'm your host, James Nave, always airing first on WPVMLP Asheville 103.7 and streaming online, WPVMFM.org. The voice of Asheville, heard all over the world, and on other community radio stations like KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio, out of Taos, New Mexico. Thank you, Walter Parks, for our theme song. WalterParks.com for more on Walter's music. Thank you, Davine Dial, for managing WPVM-FM in Asheville. And Robin Collier, thank you for managing KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio, out of Taos, New Mexico. I would like to remind you that we are sponsored by the Imaginative Storm Writing Project. If you'd like to improve your writing chops, imaginativestorm.com is a good place to go to do that. I'm in collaboration with my good friend, Allegra Huston, and Allegra and I have done a lot of work around helping writers find their way into the stories that they want to tell. So if you go to Imaginative Storm, you will find some helpful hints there on how you might be able to do that as well, and some free workshops on Zoom. We're always up for having new people show up at our workshops, and we love to do them for free because, hey, if you don't charge, you can just freeform it any way you like, just like we do on community radio. So once again, thank you ever so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. I hope you can make your way back here sometime in the future, and until then, I'll catch you on that turnaround somewhere down the line.